you hear me clearly? Sharifa, are you able to hear me? You can just respond with a thumbs up. Oba King, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Welcome. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to start this morning's session. Are you all able to see my screen? And it should say FOR2608 Supplementary Exam Preparation. Oba King, can you see my screen? Tanya, can you see my screen?
Yes, Professor, I can.
Okay, all right. Tanya, I'm going to ask you to keep your, or you can mute your mic, but if something goes wrong with the presentation, I want you to just pop in and say, something's wrong. So will you be my eyes and ears on the platform, please?
100%, Professor.
Awesome. Okay, so I see we have 3 participants this morning. You are all incredibly welcome. I'm really, really happy that you took the time to come and attend this morning's session. For those students who are unable to attend for whatever reason, that doesn't matter. There will be a recording made available. They just missed the personal interaction between us. So without further ado, let's start today's session. So what I want to do this morning is I want to just look a bit back on last year, and we will look at the exam from October last year. I want to highlight where some of the students went wrong and what you can do to rectify that. I may not provide you with a memo for that exam, but I can guide you in terms of what it is we were looking for and why you lost marks. Okay, so you must not lose sight of the fact that an open book exam is a lot more challenging than a normal sit-down exam because you have access to all the information. So then you wonder, but how is it that I assess? Because I can't ask you name the 5 principles of surveillance because you've got the information. So there has to be another way to test whether you understand and whether you comprehend the knowledge. And I do this through application. Okay, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how to prepare for the supplementary exam coming up. Okay, so what went wrong last year? There were so many of the students that came back to me and said, but I did everything you said. I wrote everything I could, but certain things went wrong. You will remember if you attended the previous session, I had a session like this before your final exam, in which I explained that the exam, the questions will be based on a case study. And this is what I mean by application. So you're going to be asked a question and you must apply the question to the case study. I want to apologize for my voice. I've got a little bit of a head cold, so I don't usually sound like this. There were answers that you had to give at the hand of the case study. But before we get there, I want us to take a quick look at the exam instructions, because I'm not sure all of you read this. Okay, so this is on page 4 of your exam question paper. And if you go back, you're going to see it there. And I want to highlight a couple of things. You are to use quotations sparingly. A maximum of 5% of the total text may be quoted. When answering the take-home exam questions, remember that an open book exam is a test at a higher level than the usual type of exam, where we test your memory as well as a bit of insight. In an open book exam, you don't have to memorize information, so you don't have to know these things at your fingertips. You are expected to prove that you can use the information, understanding and the correct application thereof. I'm not interested at this stage of your memory skills. So for this reason, you didn't earn marks by merely detailing a list of the information that you think might be relevant. You were expected to identify precisely what the information applies and then explain why you think so. Because you have the guide available, when answering the questions, we didn't give marks for direct quotations from the guide. And this should be obvious. So ask yourself, if you answered questions and you gave me exactly what is in the study guide, can you expect to pass? And the answer there is no. Absolutely not, because you have access to the information. Okay, so 2608, there were 5 questions. Where did some of the students go wrong? First of all, I see some of them misunderstood or misinterpreted the meaning of a question. They didn't know what the question expected. We will chat about that when we look at the actual exam paper. Or some of you simply copied from the study guide without further explanation. For example, the possible motives of an informer. You simply listed and copied from the study guide what these motives are. That shows me absolutely nothing. In some papers, there was either very little or no referencing at all. You will recall that I asked you to reference, even if it was in the incorrect format. There were several students that referenced in the incorrect format. You got a mark for that because you made an attempt to reference. There were only 5 questions. Now, how do you expect to pass if you leave out answering an entire question? And this happened primarily with question 5. Now, you might find question 5 very odd. I add this question because it's something that we are facing within our space, and we should all be thinking about it. And for that reason, you had to really go and think about the impact of COVID on your information gathering environment. Okay, I want us to quickly look at the exam paper from last year. Okay, Tanya, are you seeing my screen and is it showing an exam paper?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, that's awesome. Let me just move that. Okay, so what I want you to look at here, this was your exam paper from last year. Let's look at question 1. The standard interview consists of 9 steps. Okay, so in other words, I'm telling you the standard interview consists of 9 steps. Now you know where our focus is going to be. You were expected to provide a comprehensive discussion using the case study as foundation on how you will go about interviewing Mr. Jackson and Tooley. So let's pause there for a moment. Okay, so who are you going to interview? You are going to interview Jackson and Tooley using the case study as a foundation. Some students interviewed the witness, some students interviewed the suspect, some students made Mr. Ntuli into a suspect. That is not what you were supposed to do. You take the 9 steps of interviewing and you apply the interviewing based on the case study to that. What were you supposed to do? You have to explain in narrative form how you will apply these steps. So what I want to remind you of as well is that the 9 steps of interviewing has something in the middle, the section on rapport building and the use of body language in that context. So many of the students did not put that in, so that they missed totally. I want to add that for merely listing the 9 steps, which some students didn't even do, you got 1 mark. So 1 out of 19. When I say narrate, you have to narrate how you will apply each step. This means tell the reader in a conversational voice what you will do and why. So let me give you an example. Okay, the first step is preparation. Then I can, for example, say, before I conduct the interview with Mr. Ntuli, I will prepare myself and the venue where the interview will take place. I will make sure the venue is COVID compliant, because remember there, take into account COVID regulations and social distancing. Then I will gather all the available information on the case. In other words, what is it about, and about Mr. Ntuli, how long he's worked for the company, that type of thing. I will make sure I know his name and also the background and details of what is being reported. I will also make sure that I'm clear on the type of crime allegedly committed and what the elements of that crime are. So that is what you could have, should have done in terms of preparation. Some students wrote a lot of waffle. Some students gave me just what was in the study guide without linking yourself to Mr. Ntuli, to the case study. Mr. Ntuli was not a suspect. You cannot treat him like a suspect. Further along, when they got to the verification and the catch-all questions and the statement and the departure, some students went off there on a tangent and absolutely made him a suspect and said, I will caution him and I will tell him if he doesn't tell me the truth. Here he's here to tell you what he saw. He's not involved. He's a witness. So please make sure you understand who it is that you are dealing with and in what context. So that's where some of you either scored big marks and some, I'm sorry, really fell out of the bus. Okay, I want to emphasize one thing. For this question, you had to have a reference because this content comes out of the study guide. Okay, let's take a look at the second question. Use the information in the case study to compile a detailed statement. So what are we going to be doing? We are compiling a statement under oath on behalf of Mr. Jackson Ntuli. So who is the deponent? The person making the statement is Jackson Ntuli. I was dismayed at the number of students who wrote the statement in their own voice. In other words, they didn't take Mr. Ntuli's statement. It wasn't I, Jackson Ntuli, state under oath in English. No. It was I, Bernadine Benson, state under oath in English. And that was not the instruction. As a result, the majority of the students who did that failed the question too. They failed it dismally. Because what you will be reporting is not what Mr. Ntuli saw. And you can, in any event, not write about hearsay. So you cannot write on behalf of Mr. Ntuli. Mr. Ntuli has to give you his version. So in the statement, Mr. Ntuli must explain exactly what he witnessed on the surveillance footage during the time of incident described in the case study. Nothing else. Remember to include dates, times, places, and proper descriptions. Your statement must consist of an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So ask yourself, whose statement did you have to take? Is it under oath or not? The instructions are there. Dates, times, and places. Give a full explanation of what happened, what the deponent, Mr. Ntuli, witnessed, nothing else. And then some of you really didn't do well on the oaths or commission of oaths section. For this question, no reference is needed because you are writing a statement based on the case study and you don't need to reference that. So there is your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. I'm going to get to these things a little bit later when I go back to the presentation. Okay, question 3.1. Now, if you did poorly in these two questions, question 1 and 2, that's 50% of your exam paper. If you scored poorly, you've already put yourself in a poor position to pass. Okay, let's take a look at questions 3.1. In the case study, you tasked an informer to assist you with the investigation. So what are we looking at? We are looking at informers. Look at the question. Which factors did you consider before selecting this specific person and tasking him or her to assist you in tracing and identifying the suspect? So let's take a look at the case study. With the assistance of Mr. Ntuli, obtain a still image of the young man and you task an informer to help you identify the person. Okay, so you have tasked your informer. Now, what factors? Why that informer? What makes that informer good for this case study? So there you had to go and look at each of the factors. The one factor that you had to look at or that you had to consider was to what extent does this person have access to the areas that this criminal grouping might frequent. So in other words, is this person known to frequent places where people who steal jewelry will frequent? Is this person a known associate of a criminal grouping? Does this person have a reputation, your informer now, of being sometimes on the wrong side of the law? So this person that you select, relate the factors back to the case study. Can this person get rid of the stolen goods? So in other words, this person that you selected, does this person deal in high-end jewelry? Or does he deal in cars, stolen cars? So that is one of the things that you also had to ask yourself is, in relation to the case study, does this informer have access to a network where he fences or helps fence stolen jewelry? So I'm sure at this stage you can see, okay, this is what I was supposed to do. And once again, reference is needed for this question. If you told me just those 5 factors, the person must have access to the areas that the criminal group frequent, the person must be part of a specific criminal group, the person can be used by the group to launder money, the identity of the informer must be protected, and the person cannot be expected if privilege or non-prosecution from offences committed. If you gave me that, you did not pass. You would have got maybe 2 out of 7 because that's in the study guide. But how do you apply that to the case study? And that was what's important because I needed to see application. Okay, 3.2, sorry. List and discuss. Okay, so let's pause here a moment. When I ask you to write in your own words, in your own voice, and something like this happens, how do you, and now you have a list, money, ego, fear, revenge, and duty. How do you put that into your own words? The simple answer is you don't. So if there's a list, or if there are 5 principles, if there are 5 key factors, and it's like in a bullet list, you give the bullet list. But when you discuss the motives, you write it in the context of the case study in your own words. Once again, if you listed and you gave me what was in the case study, then I'm sorry, you did not pass. But if you listed and discussed about the informer and you related each of those elements or motives back to the case study, then you show me, okay, I understand in the context of the case study. Let's take duty. Why would this informer feel that he must report on this criminal group? His sense of duty, because now the owner of the jewelry store might not have been insured, or he suffers such loss, or he may have been underinsured, that the business closes down and people lose their jobs and it impacts the economy. So it's my duty to try and find the people who did this so that we can find the jewelry, so that the jewelry store does not close down. I hope that you are understanding the application part of what I'm trying to illustrate. Okay, and then 3.3. When managing informers, there are several principles that you need to apply. Okay, I'm not telling you how many principles there are, but the principles are in your study guide. The 4 principles are trust, corroboration of information, need to know, and results versus risk. Name these principles. Okay, so there you name them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. And briefly discuss each one of them in relation to the case study. Let's take corroboration of information. So your informer comes to you and says to you, it's, let's take the guy's name quickly. It's Jan Kleinans. Jan Kleinans is the person who perpetrated the crime. And so what you then do is you must confirm that. So you might have an additional informer that also is working without the 2 informers knowing about each other. So how are you going to corroborate that information? You cannot just take the informer's word for it. Many a times, if you do that, the information will not pay off and you will end up looking like an idiot. So you must make sure, how are you going to corroborate the identity of Jan Kleinans, or the identity of, or that he's at Marbury Mall? If your informer phones you and tells you the guy's at Marbury Mall, how do you confirm that? You get in your car and you drive there and you go and look. I personally won't go to the video games arcade. I will go to the security section and I will go and look on the CCTV footage and I will say, yes, I can confirm he's here. Or I can go to the owner of the video games arcade. I can show him a photo of Jan Kleinans and I can tell him, we're busy with a confidential inquiry. Can you tell me if you've seen this person here before? And then the owner can say, yes, he looks familiar. I think I've seen him a couple of times. What are you doing? You are corroborating the information that you have received. And that you must do with each of those elements, of those principles. Okay, so let's look at this. Name and briefly discuss, again at the hand of the case study, and a reference is needed. For the above 2 questions, also please, references needed. Now, question 4, based on the case study. Sorry, I just want to have something to drink quickly. Question 4, based on the case study. So once again, situate what you are going to discuss on the case study. Do you think it's a good idea for you as the investigating officer to conduct surveillance on the suspect, Jan Kleinans, while he plays video games in the gaming arcade? Stop just there. Now you have to ask yourself, do I think it's a good idea? Yes or no? So you have to provide an answer. Yes, I do, or no, I do not think it's a good idea. Now you have to give reasons. So if I say, yes, I do, I have to go and look at the surveillance principles. And I must say, so these are the surveillance principles. At the hand of these surveillance principles, in terms of the case study, if I apply to the case study, this is why I think it's a good idea for me to conduct surveillance on Jan Kleinans. However, if I say no, then I must say these are the surveillance principles. And this is the reason why I don't agree. I don't agree in terms of this one, this one, this one, this one, relating each one of those surveillance principles to the case study. Let's take, for example, that the operator must blend in with the surroundings. Now I ask myself, okay, I'm out with my partner. I am dressed in a suit and tie. You could fabricate the age of Jackson and Thule, because this is who's going to do the surveillance. So ask yourself, depending on the age, you could say Jackson and Thule is 25 years old, 27 years old. But Jackson and Thule, I think it's not sound, because he's dressed in evening wear and he's perhaps too old and he's going to stand out like a sore thumb in the gaming arcade. Or you could have said the operator must blend in with the surroundings. Mr. Thule is young enough and he has a change of clothes in his car, and he dresses into a torn denim and a t-shirt and a pair of slops, and he puts on a cap, and he looks hip. He's got a very hip shirt on, whatever the kids are wearing these days, and so he makes sure that he will blend in with the surroundings. That is what you were supposed to do in terms of this. Okay, so let's look at the content here. Base your discussion on the case study. Answer yes or no. Some of you didn't even answer the question. So for that yes or no, you get 1 point. If you didn't say yes or no, I'm not going to assume. Then you must provide supporting arguments for your answer, as I just did, and then you have to give a reference, please. Now this last question, and this is unfortunately also the question that many of the students just simply left blank, is 15 marks. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why. Let's look at the question. The COVID-19 pandemic has had an impact on all walks of life. We can all attest to that. None of us have been untouched. We've all been severely, severely affected by COVID. Now explain in your own words how the pandemic in South Africa has impacted the following areas of information gathering. Let's first look at, why am I asking this question? Why am I asking you to think about these things? For the simple reason, this is our reality. COVID is our reality. The study guide was written pre-COVID. There was no COVID. Now we have to take what we have learned and try and identify, okay, is this still going to work? Let's take statement taking. Eye contact, body language, maintain a good social, social space when you sit across the person. To what extent has COVID said, no, you can't do this anymore? We got social distancing. We got the wearing of masks. You can't share pens. You can't share rooms. Sometimes rooms are not available to take statements. People are fearful of picking up COVID and don't want to move around. They don't want to come in for a statement. They are fearful of contracting the disease. Police officials even have taken ill at work and are unable to come to work. Sometimes police stations are entirely shut down because they've had COVID incidents. That is what I'm talking about. Look at what each of these areas of the study guide, what you do in there, the activities, and to what extent has the pandemic impacted. I'm not asking you to solve the problem, or I didn't ask you to solve the problem. All you had to do is you had to say, okay, this is how statement taking was impacted. And if you gave me three facts per bullet point there, 15 marks, 15 marks. Some students did brilliantly well, and I was so impressed by how they really applied their minds. Some students did very poorly. They told me about poverty in the country. They told me about high crime rate. They told me about corruption. They told me all sorts of medical stuff, but they didn't relate it to how it impacts in each of these areas. To be able to do that, you must know what we cover in each of these areas. And as a result, some did very good, some did not do good. For this one, you don't have to give a reference because you are giving me your own voice. And that concluded your exam. And you had 2 days, 48 hours in which to do this. I see our numbers have grown extensively. So I'm going to go back to the presentation, but first let's just pause here. Are there any questions about what I've just dealt with from the past exam? I want to reiterate, I may not give you the memo. I may not give you your marked script. I don't have it. It was sent back to the exam section. If you wanted to see your marked script, you can purchase it from UDISA. But I think having gone through what I've gone through now, some of you might have realized, oh, I didn't do this, or I didn't do that, or I did this wrong, or I did that wrong, or I misunderstood. So at this stage, I want to take a pause quickly and ask, are there any questions that you absolutely have to ask now before we proceed and talk about going forward, the upcoming exam? You can simply raise your hand like that. And then I will see your hand like that, and then I'll call on you to ask your question. If you want to, if you are not comfortable, you can do this. You can come in here and you can type your question here in the question box. Okay, so if there are no immediate questions, I'm going to carry on with the presentation. Okay, Tanya, are you seeing the page that says what went wrong?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I think I've sufficiently captured where things went wrong, and I hope that it made sense to you guys now. Okay, so let's take a look at what you can expect going forward. So the summative assessment or your supplementary exam is again a take-home exam or a portfolio. The system will open on the 7th of February at 12 noon. You can access it again via the My Exams portal and download your exam question paper exactly the same way as you did for the October exam. You can just follow the links. I will again send a reminder via the module site. Please look at that and familiarize yourself with the process so that you don't wait until the morning of the exam to say, oh, my exam, I can't access it. Go and make sure that your cache is being cleaned and your password is active, and make sure that you will have enough airtime or data, or you're in a place where there's sufficient coverage for you to be able to just download your exam paper. That's all you have to do. You log on, you go in, you access your exam paper, you download it, and you log off. You do not have to stay online for 48 hours. And then you start working on your exam paper. On the morning of the exam, I'm going to be part of a group of lecturers, and we will monitor our emails to assess whether everything is going smoothly. When you are ready to upload, I will put a notification on my email. If you have a challenge and you can't upload onto the My Exam portal, but please try that first, because then it lands in the repository where all the exam papers go. It lands there immediately. Nothing gets lost. But we do provide you with a tiny URL, an alternative upload method, but sometimes students don't label that exam paper correctly, or they put the wrong module code, or something goes wrong and that exam gets lost. We do eventually find it, but then it takes several man hours and days before we can access it. And usually we only realize that after we've released the marks. And then Tanya says to me, but Prof, I uploaded, I used a tiny URL. Yes, my proof. Why don't I have marks? It says I was missing. And then we go back and we say, oh, okay, Tanya marked her stuff, FOR 2708 or 1608 or 2607, or something else went wrong. And now we go and look, and then I say, okay, yes, Tanya's exam, then it gets sent to me, then I can mark it only. So to avoid that delay, try by all means to upload on the My Exams portal. Please look on your module site. There's under additional resources, there's instructions how to PDF a document, how to scan your answers, how to make a PDF smaller and similar topics, how to clean your cache. So go through those things before the time so that you know how to do what you are expected to do. If you do go over the maximum number of pages, it's not a train smash. Just don't exceed by too much. And at this stage, if the guide is 15 pages maximum typed and you send me 20 pages, it's too much. 5 pages is too much. So make sure your settings are also right. I got exams where that consisted of 25 pages, but all the information was squeezed into the middle of the page and ran down. The margins on the side were large. So make sure your settings on your page are normal settings. If you are writing by hand, which you are permitted to do, make sure that you write neatly. And when you scan the document in, make sure that the entire page is clearly visible and that you keep your hands still while you are scanning, otherwise the document blurs. And then I can't mark. I received the strangest uploads of papers being cut in half, papers being upside down, which is not a problem. But sometimes I have pages that you can see the person's hand was shaking. I cannot make out what the person tried to say, and then I must try and guess. Okay, in the previous exam cycle, students were given an additional hour, 60 minutes, just for uploading. So where I'm telling you to be ready to upload on the 9th of February at 12 noon in the afternoon, 12 o'clock, you might receive a message that says you have an additional hour to upload. This additional hour is not to fix stuff on your exam paper. This additional hour is to upload. UNISA will not accept the excuse at 5 to 1 or 5 past 1 that says, I struggled to upload, there was load shedding, this happened, that happened. You have an hour to fix that. So if you start uploading at 5 past 12, and you hit a problem, you contact me immediately. From your UNISA email to my UNISA email. Don't send me a WhatsApp. Don't contact me on Telegram. Use only the UNISA email, because I'm sitting in a meeting. Then I can tell the meeting organizer, Tanya has a problem. She's trying to upload this and this, and this is what's happening. What must I tell her? Then we fix it there in real time. But if you tell me 5 to 1, I'm having a problem, I cannot upload, then I'm afraid you waited until 5 to 1 to start uploading. So make sure that you use that last hour for uploading and not for fixing your assignment. You have 48 hours. Use it wisely. When you are done uploading your work, don't forget to tick the honesty declaration box. Otherwise, the system will not accept your upload. Make sure that you upload the correct document. I received exam question papers. I received tutorial letters. I received study guides. I received personal documents. I cannot do anything with that. You get a 0. The student fails. No supplementary. No redo. No retake. And make sure that you do not protect the document in any format whatsoever. That is such a problem to fix. Okay, what are you going to focus on? There's nothing that you can study for this exam, except to say You're writing an open book exam, use your study guide, use the feedback tutorial letters. You're not going to get the same questions as you did in the assignments or in the last exam, but you're going to find thematically similar things coming through. So what do I mean by that? All I can say is take your study guide and read through it several times before your exam. Highlight key aspects in chapters, flag and tag those pages. Make sure it's user-friendly so you can find things. My questions will not necessarily be, let's take a look at the study guide quickly. Let's take a look at learning objective, study guide 2, statements, note-taking and investigative reports on page 17. Name and discuss the different types of statements. There's the heading, types of statements. So now you can go there and you can, okay, so this is what she's talking about. That's not necessarily what these questions are going to be like. Sometimes the information that you are looking for is inside the text, is inside the discussion, and is not flagged by a heading. So you need to know what's written inside the study guide. You need to be familiar with what we discuss in the study guide. If you don't, you are not going to know where to begin and you're going to end up giving the wrong information through. So make sure you know the content of your study guide. As I said, open book. You can also go onto Google and Google some of the things, but you may not get outside help. You may not have a buddy sitting next to you helping you. You may not help each other. You may not work together. It's an exam. You may not contact me and tell me, Prof, I don't understand this question. What must I do? I may not help you. There's no invigilation, and that's why you sign the honesty declaration. We are also sending your stuff to return it in. So when we pick up similarity between two students or a student has copied directly, you're going to pick up problems. Okay. It also implies that you must use your study guide. That's what an open book is. Use your study guide, use other relevant sources. And by this, I mean South African context. You cannot take this case study and apply European principles or USA principles if it doesn't apply in South Africa. It has to be relevant to the South African context. Please do not make use of the assignment molds to complete this task. You will be cheating not only yourself, but you're going to be lying to the world about the quality of your education. And when you get to work, you cannot do the work and they're going to say, oh, that qualification from UNISA is useless. This person can't do the work. Meanwhile, you are the reason you can't do the work. Remember, one of the fundamental characteristics in investigation is that of ethical and honest conducts. Ethics is not what you're doing when everybody is watching. Ethics is more about what you are doing when nobody is watching. So for this round of exam, as I said, there's no invigilator app, so nobody is watching. And therefore you must tick the honesty declaration, otherwise the system will not accept your work. Turnitin will detect how well you've paraphrased your work, and it will also flag when two students submit the same or very similar work. Okay, let's pause a bit and talk about the case study. The basis of your supplementary exam will be a case study. So there's going to be a case study. It's not going to be the same case study, but you will get a case study. When you read it, you are definitely going to say, yeah, no, I identify with this. And that's the idea. You must be in a context that you can identify with. Then you have to answer the questions at the hand of the case study. Please read the questions carefully and ask yourself, what does this question expect of me? Is it name and discuss? Remember, I said if you have to name elements, you don't have to paraphrase the name because the name is the name. Let's say name the 9 steps of interviewing. Then you name them: preparation, introduction, rapport, questions. You cannot paraphrase it, but when you get to the discussion portion, that's when your own words come in. Same with identify and explain. So in other words, identify the principles of surveillance at the hand of the case study. Sorry. Or theory. And always try and answer the question in your own words. If it's list and explain, you cannot put the list in your own words.
Professor, you muted yourself.
I'm sorry, I'm just coughing. And I don't want you guys to hear me coughing. Okay, so always try and make sure that you explain in your own words. That's very important. These are your 5 study units. Remember to look at the questions and ask yourself, what is it asking? And then determine, is it a principle, a theory, a process, or a step that must be followed? And then you answer at the hand of that. In order to be able to do this, you must know, what do we discuss in investigative interview? What is covered in Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4, and Unit 5? This is where the reading of your study guide will come in handy, especially if you flagged and tagged the different units. Now, for obvious reasons, I cannot tell you exactly what is covered in the exam. But what I can tell you is you have to reference the sources that you are using when answering the questions. If you used the study guide specifically, or if you used an external source, like a textbook or an article, then you cite that source. You do it for every question and sub-question that requires it. You will remember when we went through the exam, we saw that the question on the statement didn't require referencing, and the last question on COVID didn't require referencing. For the rest, you had to reference. Okay, because this is so important, I want you to see where I'm going with this without me saying anything. So ask yourself, if there's a statement, whose statement is being written? What is the type of statement? Is it under oath? Is it not under oath? Those are the primary questions. Make sure you know what is in the preamble. Many of you in the exam wrote your own statement and not the statement on behalf of Mr. Ntuli. So read the instructions and ask yourself, whose statement am I writing? And what type of statement is this? This is important to ask as it impacts on the preamble and the oath. For example, if the instruction is write the statement of Mr. X under oath, then you know the statement has to start, I, Mr. X, state under oath in English. That is important, and we will look at that again when we get to the Oaths and Commission of Oaths section. The statement must have 3 distinct sections: the preamble, the body or the content, and the Oaths or Commission of Oaths sections. Do not write these as headings. Look at the example in the study guide. Okay, let's take a look at the various sections and what's important in each of those sections. First of all, the preamble. It is very important that you capture all of this information. You have to complete it as comprehensively as possible because it contains the details of the person making the statement, the deponent. Now remember, at a police station, it's not always the detective that takes the statement. A person comes to the police station, to the client service center, and says, I want to report the theft of my motor vehicle. The police official behind the counter will then take your statement. That person, that police official, doesn't see you after this. After this, your statement goes into a case docket and it gets given to a detective. Now the detective must try and contact you. If your address or your cell number or your work address or your email is not there, how is the detective going to contact you? Okay, so look at the information that has to be captured. In some instances where the deponent lives, it's a rural place or a rural village. Then you capture the zone or the chief's details. or the name of the village and the name of the chief, so that the detective can see, okay, I have to go to this zone, to this chief's area, and the chiefs know their people, and the chief will then help me to find this person. Ask yourself, who is the person making the statement according to the instructions in the exam paper? And then you construct a statement along those lines. If you do not, you will trip and fall again if this question is asked. Full name and surname, language and declaration under oath. Remember, because it's under oath. Gender and age, ID number. Residential address with a telephone number or a cell number. Work address with a work telephone number. Email address and occupation. Those are not negotiable in the preamble, and all in one paragraph. Before we look at the content, let's just look at the oaths and the commission of oath section. Now, the oaths and the commission of oath section is what gives this document the legitimate gravitas. What does that mean? That means if a statement is made under oath, it has legal standing, it is evidence, and it can be presented as evidence in court, and it's viewed as the truth in court when it's presented like this. If a statement is not under oath or something is wrong with the oath, it gets chucked out at court, and immediately already there's a question mark in the magistrate's mind. If you slipped on the oath, what else did you slip on? So when you present the statement to court, the court sees it through the lens of being either under oath, which the example is we're giving, unsworn or unaffirmed. This basically means I don't acknowledge God, I don't believe in God. So then I will say, I, Bernadine Carol Benson, state unaffirmed, present an unaffirmed statement in English, which means, or I solemnly swear that this is the truth. I will not take the oath at the end, but it has to be clear in the beginning, and that's why you ask the deponent, will you have a problem to take the oath? Okay, what is the oath? The oath is where you put your hand in the air and you say, I swear the content of the statement is true, so help me God. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, we will then do an unsworn or unaffirmed statement in which I ask you, do you tell me and you acknowledge that what you are going to tell me is the truth as far as you know it? And then I say, yes, I do, I affirm that, and or I acknowledge that. And then the preamble to the statement will contain that. Similarly, when a child or a developmentally challenged person makes a statement, there are very specific parameters. It's a special police official that takes the statement. Not anybody can do it. So if you are ever faced with a situation, you do not take the statement. You get a suitably qualified person to do this. Okay. So let's take a look at the oaths and the commission of oaths. It's important that once you have captured the deponent's statement, that they read the statement and that they tell you, okay, but this isn't what I said, or this isn't what I meant. And then you've got to pull a line through that. Both you and that person sign in the margin, and you write in there what is it that the person meant. And that's why it's so important when you take the statement of a person to use the person's words. Don't try and interpret what you think the person means. If you are not sure that you are understanding correctly, ask the person. So you say your car was parked at Pick n Pay on the 5th level. Am I understanding you correctly? Then he says, no, it was the 4th level. No, it was definitely the 4th level. I remember now. So then you just clarify so that going back, you make sure that you have the correct information. I saw the suspect flee the scene. There was a green shirt and a black pants. Okay, so can you tell me the suspect that fled the scene? Can you remember? Was it a man or a woman? No, it was definitely a man. but I'm not sure, hey, the people look different these days. Clarify. And if the deponent says, I think it was a man, but I am not 100% sure, you say, I think it was a man, but I'm not 100% sure. It's important to capture everything related to the case, whether the person thinks it's relevant or not. They don't know what is needed, so capture everything relevant to the case. Once the deponent has read the statement, then you administer the oath. Then you ask the person, then the person reads the following and says, I know and understand the content of the statement. Do you know and understand the content of the statement, sir? Yes, I do. Do you have an objection to taking the prescribed oath? I have no objection to taking the prescribed oath. Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience? I consider the oath to be binding on your conscience. Sir, please raise your right hand. Tell me, or repeat after me, I swear the content of the statement is true, so help me God. It's important that you write this down in the affidavit, otherwise, or in the statement, otherwise it's not under oath, and then the person signs. Now ask yourself, I'm sure you've gone to give a statement at a police station. When the oath was administered, were you asked to swear that the content of the statement is true, so help you God? If not, your statement was not under oath. Okay, so exactly as it's written there, please make sure it's captured in your oaths section. The next section is the Commissioner of Oaths. Now, this is usually the police official that takes your statement. There are members of the public who are commissioners of oaths, but it is an appointment that you get, that you apply for under specific criteria. Then the Commissioner of Oaths will say the following, and what's nice is there's a stamp in the police station that they use, so the police official doesn't have to say this, write it down. I certify that the above statement was taken by me and that the deponent acknowledges that he, and then usually there's a /C. In this instance, the deponent is a male, so we have he there, knows and understands the content of the statement. So what was I finding in the exam? I certify that the deponent acknowledges that he/she knows and understands the content of the statement, but nothing is crossed out. So in other words, you did not read what you have written there. You didn't apply your mind. So make sure that you write the correct information. Okay. The next line, the statement was sworn to before me and the deponent's signature was placed there on in my presence at place, date and time. Then the signature, then Commissioner of Oaths, full name and surname of the Commissioner of Oaths, and physical street address. Now, this is usually the signature of the police officer, written Commissioner of Oaths, full name and surname, Constable Mpola Kalakala, and then physical address of the police station. Now look at the following. The statement has to be divided into paragraphs. Number the paragraphs, please. And the bottom of each page, if your statement goes over onto a next page, has to be initialed and dated by the deponent and the police official, except the last page where the deponent signs in full. Now, sometimes when your statement is just one page, this last little bit, you get mahala because your last page has been signed in full. Then it's as if the rest has been done correctly. This is in your study guide. Please use it. Okay, the content of the statement. A statement is one of the most important pieces of evidence that a detective or an investigating officer uses as evidence in whatever forum. There's no perfect answer in terms of the content, what we were looking for, but there are guiding principles. A statement must be accurate, it must be complete, it must be concise, comprehensive, and it must contain the elements of the crime in question. It must be written in a clear language without changing what the deponent said. and it must be in a specific format. So if the deponent uses terminology that you don't understand or words that you don't understand, ask him to explain it, and then you use that word. This is what the deponent says. And it's usually better when the deponent writes their own statement, because then you get the pure version. But this isn't always possible. Then you write the statement on behalf of the deponent. It has to contain the narrated story of the victim or the witness or the complainant. It must be written in the first person. I arrived at home. I saw that the front door to my house was broken into. That's what I mean by first person. The quality of the statement impacts the evidence in court. So if it's a poorly taken statement, for example, the next says statement must capture the elements of the crime. If it's theft, what is the definition of theft? Unlawful and intentional appropriation of another's corporeal property with the intention of taking that and keeping the financial value of that permanently away from the owner. So there's the elements of the crime. If you recall, FOR 1502, we dealt with theft. The 4 elements of theft are there. So in a statement, you have to capture the 4 elements of the crime. It must be visible in the text. It has to be narrated chronologically. And this is usually where you can see if somebody is fabricating fact, because they jump between now and yesterday and tomorrow, and then they jumble their thoughts. Again, use the terminology of the deponent. Do not try to interpret what I think you mean. Write down what the deponent says. If you think that the deponent is perhaps using a word that they don't really understand, clarify. Tell him, you said the person had a plethora of stuff with him. Are you familiar with the meaning of the word plethora? Then he can tell you, yes, I know it means a lot. Okay, so you had a plethora of stuff. So it's important to use the terminology, because sometimes that specific terminology is what helps you in court to prove your case. Statement taking is a specialized skill, but it gets better with practice. Gary Player always said, the more he practiced, the luckier he got with golf. So it's practice, 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 practice. Okay. I want to come back to the case study. When you look at your question, when you look at your exam, relate what you are answering at the hand or the information presented in the case study. If the case study deals with a housebreaking and theft, and you have to give the description of a suspect, use the description in the case study. A white male, slender build, dark tracksuit pants, light jacket, hoodie, no mask on his face, scar on the left cheek. So ask yourself, what type of information would somebody need to be able to identify the suspect again? It's also important to ask the deponent, if you see the suspect again, will you recognize him or her? Then the person says, yes, okay, I will recognize the person again should I see him or her. That type of information is important, because when the police official then does his investigation, he knows, okay, this person saw the suspect clearly. I can do a lineup. I can get a lineup and see if he can identify the person. But if nothing is said in the statement, then I'm not even sure that the detective's going to pursue that. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, you saw the suspect clearly. You will identify him, but you never said you would. And that's also where the police official or the person taking the statement probes and asks. And I think we have reached the end of our session. So I'm going to close here and stop sharing my screen. Okay. Are there questions? I don't see any questions in the chat box. I'm super excited that more people showed up. That's awesome. Okay, any questions? I'm going to take 3 at a time. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, and then I'm going to take the first 3 names, and then we will work it down from there. You can just raise your hand, and then I will call on the first 3 if you have questions. Are there no questions? If you don't want to ask on the forum, you can always write a question for me in the chat box, because not everybody is comfortable to speak on the forum. Obakeng, do you want to ask a question?
No, ma'am. I got the clarity of everything,
Okay.
so
Okay,
I
awesome.
understand.
Okay. Was the session helpful? Was it informative?
Yeah, it was very helpful. I think the problem in the first exam was that I didn't think outside the box too much. So this time I will interpret the questions better and use my own opinions and statements and answer the questions effectively.
Okay. Obakeng, that makes me very happy, because I don't want to see you this year again. I don't want to see any of you this year again in 2608.
Yes, you won't. Thank
I'll
you.
say, I'm very happy to hear that.
Thank you.
Anybody else with a question, a comment, a viewpoint? Okay, folks, then I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm super pleased that you all attended. What I will do is, once we leave the session, I will make the link available on the module site. And if you need to go back and double check something, please go and do so. I want to reiterate, please read the instructions of your exam. Make sure you understand the instructions. Read the questions carefully. Make sure you understand what is being asked. Reference where you need to reference. List where you need to list. Explain where you need to explain in your own words. And where you have to relate what you are saying to the case study. Please. I'm going to say it again. Read the questions carefully and ask yourself, what is the question expecting of me? And then I am going to bid you all good day. Have an awesome day further. And I hope you all ace this next exam. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Obakeng.